Welcome to the In-Betwixt and In-Between. This is Leadership Limbo, a podcast aimed at helping leaders embrace the discomfort and power of leading themselves and others in the midst of it all. We blend real insight with practical tools to help you lead with self-awareness, purpose, and influence wherever you are on your leadership journey. John, it's good to see you as always.
Josh, good to see you, my friend. How are you doing here as we wrap up the month of August here with a cool spell here in Denver, Colorado?
It's been nice here in Denver to have a little bit more of the cloud cover, and I am just feeling a little bit older as my youngest son is turning 10 on Saturday, the very end of August, and so this is I annoy Lindy all the time with these references to math and numbers in relation to ages, but I am officially 4 times as old as my youngest son today, and after Saturday, that number continues to decrease. So yeah, it's a perfect 4 times ratio.
Was a management podcast. I was told there would be no math, so I'm not sure.
That's it. We're done with the math. We'll get to the ideas. Let's go to the ideas, John.
Congrats to him. Real excited for today's episode. I think it's because we've referenced this a few times and want to get a little bit more in depth with it. And so today we're really talking about vision. And when we think about who we are as a leader and a middle manager, how does vision impact your work? Before I jump into that, really want to go over last week's homework. As we remembered, last week was our rebranding episode of the term manager, right? And the word there and why we think it's so critical.
And we're back on Spotify. On Spotify. If you missed us last week because Spotify booted us, it was temporary and we didn't get any strikes against us because it was a true misunderstanding. So just wanted to let the listeners know.
Exactly. So rebranded that and rebranded our episode, our title at the same time. But last week, our charge to you, amidst many of the things we talked about that what good managers do, was we said, hey, find time to find strengths of 2 people on your team. And as Josh said, give it no qualifications, just what are they good at? And then make sure that you're thinking about, is their work actually aligned to what they're doing? And are you helping them to see that alignment between their strengths and the work you have them doing? So we hope you took the time to do that. I certainly was able to do it in some client work this week of seeing how different strengths are aligned with the work people are doing. And so I'm trying to keep that front of mind for myself as well. So getting back to this talk about vision, I think one of the things that Josh and I have mentioned over the last few weeks is that, as we all know, vision is really important in terms of where an organization is going. Likely everyone has heard Simon Sinek talk about this, right? And it starts with why, if you've read his book, or the golden rule, as he puts it, that what is really important is not just what do we get, but why do we do it? What's the importance of that? And so that's that vision, right? We're all familiar with that. We talked about that sometimes as a manager, or when we get into leadership, one of the things that we often start with, or at least I have experienced this, is they talk to you about setting vision, or you read books that really start with that. Then frankly, you get into the reality of middle-level leadership where most of us start, and you begin to find, well, hey, I'm actually executing a vision that's already laid out. I'm not creating my own. Certainly you can do things within the team you drive to maybe set a vision for the team, but it should be really aligned to the larger network, right? So, or organization. And so that's a real tension. When you step into leadership, often it's because I really want to drive something new forward. And then you get into a spot of management and it's, hey, I'm actually needing to do more work and really important work about my alignment to the vision that has been handed to me and entrusted to me to carry out. And I love that word, entrusted. Great managers are entrusted to do a lot and to move things forward on behalf of a leader or an organization as well. And so there's skill in that I don't think sometimes when people jump into management, they think about, because we all get into leadership because we'd like to be the next CEO of a Fortune 500 or whatever it might be. So the truth of that is you might not be setting the vision or making the decisions about it. And so when you're carrying out a vision, I want to start with this idea, and then Josh is going to get into the more tricky part of this, is what are some of the things that you do when you are fully aligned with the vision, right? Maybe you've been in an organization for a long time, you've moved up because you're bought into it, or you see an organization from afar and you want to join it so you can be part of that, whatever it might be, but you're fully aligned. There's no interpersonal work that needs to happen there. we would still argue there's a lot you need to do. You can't just go by well, I'm on this, let's just go do it, because then actually you might end up falling into what we talked about last week, just being an executor. You don't drive with vision, you just drive with like, let's get the thing done, because you are not
Right.
continually processing the vision or the ask. And you can't stop doing that just because you're aligned to it. So I'd say number one is when you are working for a team or an organization and you have your boss and they've shared with you, here's the vision of what we're doing. Number one, you have a duty to understand it and to internalize it, right? Spend some time really digging into it, driving it. I will tell you this, there was a long time ago, and I was a brand new teacher, maybe first or second year, lower 20s. And my school was doing some work around vision setting and values. And at the time, I thought, this is a waste of time. We all know we just need to like be doing the work of teaching kids and getting it done. And why are we in this together? And I didn't want to hear certain people like argue about this for an hour and a half when I thought it was just a thing of semantics, right? We were just arguing about words, essentially. I've learned over time, though, that really healthy teams, and perhaps the way we were doing that as a group wasn't good. And that's why I didn't love it. But I have learned when done well and revisited and committed to, really does help drive the work further. It really does. That language and the
Totally.
importance of that is super key, right?
Yeah, and let me add I
Yeah.
heard a story, John, and just to drive on this vision piece, and I might be misquoting the very specifics. So if I do,
Yeah.
anyone could drop in the comment. But during World War II, during the process of building the atomic bomb, there was a stretch of time in which they were not moving rapidly enough. Like the work was going pretty slow. All of the engineers, the scientists, the vast majority of them did not know what their purpose was. They knew they were working on something. They didn't know how it fit together. They didn't know where it was going. And as the context changed, a new individual came in. I'm forgetting the name of which person started to take over some of the lead. Of course, Oppenheimer was related. I don't believe he was the one who operationalized this, but they became much more transparent with what they were doing. And almost overnight, the urgency and the efficiency in which this group of individuals, this team was working, flipped from things that were taking months, maybe even years, I don't remember the precise time frame, to days and weeks.
Got it.
Once they knew where they were going, it became way easier for the team to work towards that vision. So if there's a great example out there, that's definitely one of them to just drive home the point of why vision matters
Yeah.
as a manager or as a leader or as
And
anyone who works in this organization.
right. And ultimately, not only because now I know what we're ultimately doing, I can drive there, but we work together better in doing that. We see the alignment between the
That's
pieces
right.
as well. So again, yeah, you're understanding it and internalizing it as a manager, right? You got to continue to do that work even when you ultimately agree with it. Then do you know the content and understand the strategy behind the vision so that you can explain it to others, right?
Mhm.
We're not necessarily getting into that today. I think there is this part of this that is about that, how you manage others towards outcomes and towards vision.
Right.
We'll probably mention it a little bit, but you have to know it well enough and keep internalizing it so that like your natural rhythm of speech with your team is related to the vision. It's related to where we're going. It's related to these results,
Mhm.
not simply just related to the tactical things that you're doing, right? But again, to your point, Josh, let's see it towards how what you're doing is contributing to the larger whole and the important work we're doing here,
Right.
right? And then again, is that vision the North Star in your prioritization, your strategy, and your tactic? You can, as I alluded or said earlier, you can fall into a hole just because you believe in something, or even, great, I'm happy to go forward. I want to impress my boss. Let's do this thing, of just, again, not really tying it to the ultimate purpose. And then you lack motivation for others. And then you yourself kind of forget, well, why am I here? Why does this
Mhm.
matter to me? And over time, you become a person who's just pursuing outcomes at no end versus
Right.
continuing to motivate both yourself and others towards the cause. And perhaps you even forget kind of like, why are we here? And so really important thing that as you use the vision, that you use the vision to drive strategy and to prioritize. And just because you're bought into it does not mean that you don't have a lot of work to continue to bring yourself and your team back to it, so that also as needs evolve, you can still keep the eye on the prize, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so, Josh, want to, if there's anything you want to add to that, and then I know
Yeah.
you want to take us on a different direction of when
Right.
it's not so easy to align.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great overview, John. The only thing I would really add is I think the litmus test for you as a manager or a leader right now is, could you articulate the vision with a 70 to 90% accuracy? Not literally word for word, but like, do you know it well enough right now? Like, as you're driving in your car, as you're walking around the block, as you're eating breakfast, do you know the vision of your organization? And if you don't, I think it would be great to pull up the website and look at it
And
and
test it out
test it out.
test it out with your manager, or frankly
Right.
other contemporaries at your level. Like, are
Yeah.
you all speaking the same language? Because that
Right.
also means interdepartmental work will be
Right.
stronger as well, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Test yourself. I think that would be the great kind of first takeaway from today's episode is, do you know the vision of your organization?
Yeah.
Different question if they don't have one. And if they don't, that's a whole different podcast. But we are going to shift it to another angle, that
Visionless podcast.
the visionless podcast. You know, the second reality though for a lot of us is we have a vision, but I don't fully agree with it. I didn't create it, and for the vast majority of us, we don't. You know, we don't create the vision. We may have the honor of contributing to it. We might even be the decider, but we have also had to take the input from others. So it's rarely precisely that 100% what I would have created vision.
And can I just say,
Yeah,
there's another part
yeah.
to this, 'cause I think you're going to go the route of like, I'm not fully bought in, or maybe even disagree. I also think when you're dealing with, and this is maybe for people who are working with new managers, but if you're working with a manager who's less mature or has done like less, and I don't mean mature like their work habits, I just mean in terms of like time in the role,
Hmm.
or they haven't internalized as much what it needs to be a manager. Number one, have them listen to this podcast. But number two, they might not be starting with that framework of, do I understand the vision and am I connected? So it's not even that they're bought into it and forgetting about it. It's just that they're operating agnostic of the vision because they're just focused on certain elements of that, of their leadership. So I just
Right.
wanted to add that it can also fall in that bucket too.
That's right. That's right. So I'm going to start with actually one of the pieces of limbo, or the nature of that liminal space, that in between, which is leading others in between your own thoughts and your own kind of internal wiring, and then being able to go forth and lead others. And the concept is self-preservation. And one of the reasons that I personally at times have struggled to carry out vision is I look back and look at, events in my past and moments in which a vision was shared and I just did not agree with it. And for those who know me, I think I'm a good team player, but I also have strong opinions. And I also sometimes don't immediately shift over to somebody else's point of view. I think oftentimes for integrity, and sometimes out of stubbornness and self-preservation. And so, years back, and this is for our educators listening to this, a lot of us have gone through the pendulum swing of teacher evaluation concepts, practices, and there was a stage in the early to mid 2000s when a lot of organizations moved really hard towards very specific, in some cases, performance and pay-based systems that were very
Merit-based.
merit-based systems that were structured in very explicit ways with the intentions of being transparent and fair. No problem in some ways with the idea of being clear about what performance should look like in a role. And teaching, of course, has historically kind of gone through ebbs and flows of how explicit and clear evaluation systems have been. There were some elements of the system that I did not fully buy into, in the vision of which I did not fully get. And as I look back, a lot of it was actually due to my own attempts at self-preservation. And I want to propose 3 questions that I think we should always think about when faced with something that is challenging to us. The first is, what am I afraid of losing? What am I afraid of losing? That is a heart of self-preservation behavior. In this case, maybe I was afraid of losing a little bit of the peer-to-peer, buddy-buddy, like camaraderie that existed earlier in my career, when I was like, well, I was just teaching a few years ago. Now I'm leading other teachers, and having to sit down and apply a set of expectation systems and rules to somebody that I probably would have kind of recoiled at a little bit myself. Am I afraid of losing the ability to kind of have a good relationship with that person?
Yep.
Again, the answer to that's a little rhetorical. No, but it definitely was one of the fears I had. What am I trying to hide? I might be hiding the fact that maybe I felt like I wasn't able to execute this system very well.
Yep.
And it would be easier for me to hedge against that vision because it would already set me up to already be on the the side of saying, well, I never really bought into it in the first place. What was below that might have been the fear that I wouldn't be able to put all the work in to give that kind of detailed report to a teacher every couple of weeks.
Yep.
So I was afraid of potentially, experiencing maybe the word is like insufficiency or not being good enough.
Inadequacy, right?
Inadequacy, yeah. And so I might have been trying to hide something when I was kind of pushing back on this vision as
Right.
opposed to actually leaning into better understanding it. And what am I trying to prove? I think that that's another recognition in my own life, is that oftentimes I'm at not my best when I'm trying to compare myself, when I'm trying to prove myself. And I might have been trying to prove myself in those moments as somebody who was a little bit outside the system. Like, you know what, this is what the man has told us to do, or the
Right.
institutions required us to do. But you know what? I'm going to kind of prove that I'm like, I walk to the beat of my own drum.
I'm just
And
like you guys. I'm one of
right.
you. Like, yeah,
That's
right.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And that we've talked about in previous podcasts. And I think that self-preservation behaviors very well might be the reason that I and or you or all of us have at some times or at some points kind of recoiled at a vision that's not our own.
Yeah.
And I can be pretty good at trying to rationalize and provide like the evidence and go straight to the facts. And those have merit. But if I were to really be honest with myself, some of my pushback was much more interior. It was much more internal to my own fears. What was I afraid of losing? What was I trying to hide? What was I trying to prove? So I will challenge our listeners to think about that when it comes to something that you've recently resisted. It could even be something different than vision.
Yeah.
But in this context, we're talking about it there. So that being said, I wanted to share that tool. John, I know there's another concept that you want to share with us today about when you are in disagreement with a vision.
Yeah.
How do you actually move from that to something that is still productive while honoring both your own thoughts about a matter, but the value of being aligned with your full team?
Yeah. Just first off, like, that's my mind exploding. Josh and I script these out, but we don't obviously know when you do a podcast, you don't know how, like, what's the framing of it. I think Josh did just listening to him. The things he brings up there that I think are a couple keywords I want to note is fear
Mm,
is a real thing. We believe in this podcast, one of the things we always wrestled with was like, how much of this is about just internal work and identity and who you are and how you're flexing into leadership, and how much of it is being really practical to folks. But I think what you see in Josh's discussion there is so much of it is, I mean, the internal work is a practical part of it. And
yeah.
I like it because I think when Josh went into this, you may have been saying, well, yeah, I totally disagree with what my boss says. And that's a part of it. Or I disagree with what my company says, or I don't like this. But what Josh said there is actually, if you do enough work on yourself and connect yourself, you might find it's actually the fear you have about
Mhm.
executing it. Not that you dislike the thing so much, but am I capable? And so
Yeah.
love that, Josh. And then this idea of just how are you jockeying for position with different people? And is that influencing the way that you carry out it as well? So,
Yeah.
uh,
Self-preservation gets in the way often. And so it's a really important concept for us to keep thinking about.
I love that. Yeah. So Josh, to the point Josh said, when I got with this concept of disagree, then commit, right? And commit, I suppose you could say, it doesn't really matter to
Mhm.
me. And I would argue this is a really important thing for you as a manager on a team to adjust it or adapt as a concept and a mindset that you go into anything with your team. If you are a higher level manager or a senior member team or a manager of managers, I think this needs to be part of like your meeting cadence, that it's maybe a commitment that you guys have. Hey, we're going to use this space to disagree on something if we have disagreements, and to debate it and to open ourselves up to it. But ultimately, we got to get to a decision. And when that decision maker makes a decision, we all have to commit as this team so that we
Mhm.
can better execute it with others. And so it's that simple. I mean, it's a concept where, there were times when I ran team meetings where I would say, okay, we're going to dig into this agenda item. We're going to take 30 minutes or more to discuss it because I think there's going to be disagreement, or I know there's disagreement because I've already began to share this with you all and I see different sides to this. We're going to open it up for debate. When it's done, myself or another member of the team who is the decision maker is going to take that input, and they're going to ultimately make the decision that needs to be made to carry this out.
Mhm.
And I want you to know that we're moving forward with the information we've heard from the group, but it is our job as a collective here then to commit to that. And you can do this with any team. You can do it if you're the manager of a group of individual contributors who you want to get their input, but then let them know that you're the decision maker, but you're hearing their point of view. And it's your hope and desire and expectation that they'll commit to it when you've made that decision. Or again, with a whole group of managers who then have to take that decision and effectively spread it out throughout their departments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the reason Josh and I love this is because we really do believe in this idea of creating organizations where the disagreement is valued, right? The discernment is needed, that my voice matters, but your voice matters to the point that like I use that to make a decision, and I'm going to use all the information I have to make the best decision. And the people who don't get to make the decision have to be comfortable with like, I'm glad I got the chance to make it. I understand both sides and I'm ready to move forward now. And so that as a manager is both like, how do you make that part of your practice, but then how do you teach others to have this practice of disagree and commit so that one, we've been transparent, we've heard all voices, and now we're moving forward with all that in mind to make a decision. So
that's right.
I encourage you to use that language as a method with your teams, as maybe one of your, not core values, but just like common practices with your team, and give it language so that people can effectively execute that way, not just like in the moment being like, well, we made a decision, you all need to commit. Give it language, make it a practice of your team so people can internalize it and make it routinized.
Love
Josh,
that.
other ideas on that?
Yeah, no, that's great, John. A couple of thoughts come to mind. One, just a quick attribution. I think the Bezos model of leadership kind of talks about that term, which ties to what you just said, which is so important. Common language. Give it a term, give it a practice. It makes it more real. I also think, just pulling out briefly from what you shared, the idea of being transparent about how a decision is going to get made also helps people feel safer about where and how to contribute. So if you don't ever say it's going to be my decision or it's going to be a vote of a majority, we need unanimity.
Right.
We're going to take it to a different committee who will take our recommendation. That transparency allows for more people to contribute, knowing that their voice has some path forward that isn't just kind of caught vaguely in some sort of decision-making matrix that is opaque. Love that. And I think, the point of commit also means that you don't just leave the meeting saying I'm committed and then sit in front of all of your direct reports complaining about the decision that was made. Well, we committed to it, but commitment actually means living it out in your words and action. It doesn't mean that you have to, not engage in other people's disagreements with it as a manager, but you do need to be clear that this is how the decision was made. This is why we made the decision. I'm behind that decision as a member of this team, and I will work with you to help you to get to that place. What support do you need? I will challenge you to get there. So, and I love that.
I want to go back to one thing before you get into the next thing. You were talking about decision-making. We don't have time to get into this. Could be another future podcast.
It will.
There are decision-making frameworks that we would recommend. Rapid. You can Google this. The other one I've heard of is Mocha. If your team doesn't have a decision-making like framework, start with those. I promise you we'll probably talk about those at some point, but really critical to this, whether you're setting a vision for something that you want to then become the long-term view of something, or just defining a strategy for this next month, right?
Yeah,
so
love it.
Just wanted to add those.
Yeah, we can, John and I both know part of the reason we keep these podcasts about 25 minutes is if we didn't, they'd be like 5 hours and we just keep talking about all of the stuff. But to wrap this one up for this week, we hope this was a helpful conversation for you to listen into about thinking about vision. So we want to leave you with 4 kind of takeaways. I just encourage you to pick one. Pick one of these to work on for next week. The first is internalization of a vision. Do you know the stated vision of your organization well enough to teach it to somebody else? If not, challenge yourself to internalize it. Second, integration. How are you linking the vision to more tangible ways of seeing it in your daily practices? Do you reference it sometimes in a one-on-one or even ground some of your presentations you facilitate with your teams, referencing back to the vision? Think of a way to actualize the vision beyond just like that one opening meeting where you talked about it at the beginning of the year. The third, self-preservation. I think that resonates with both of us on this podcast here who are presenting on it. But for those who are listening, I'm sure the same is true. Think about your self-preservation tendencies, right? Ask yourself those questions. What am I afraid of losing? What am I trying to hide? What am I trying to prove, and to whom? And then the last one we just talked about, it could be a focus for you this week. Disagree and commit. Have you had a recent situation you want to reflect back on where you disagreed but didn't commit, or you didn't disagree at all because you felt like there was no space for that? Or possibly you have a decision coming up where your team is going to need to put all of their thoughts on the table. There will be disagreements. Could you use that framework coming up in one of the next meetings you have? Maybe if you're listening to this today and you have a meeting today, propose it to your team. it would be a really helpful, tangible, actionable way to live out what we talked about today. That being said, John, take us home.
Yeah. First off, folks and friends, just thanks for listening to this. We really appreciate it. We've had a lot of fun doing this and have gotten some good feedback that people have found value in it, and we want to keep doing that. So number one, please download our podcast so you get it every week, wherever you get your podcasts. Again, Josh noted, back on Spotify, trademark war in the past, so go for it. Would appreciate a 5-star review if you have them, or any review, but 5 stars are nice, and most of you are friends and family, so we'd ask you to be kind. But leave comments as well. We want to engage with those comments and then use them at the beginning of each episode to bring up a thought that someone had, or to share a point of view that maybe you have. But please share this broadly. Our hope is that you get this to people who are managers of managers, or managers themselves, who would find value not only for themselves, but in sharing with their team, and hopefully building some better practices when it comes to good management. So until next time, this has been Leadership Limbo, where we make space for the tension and the tools for the journey. See you in the in-between.